The definition of that is that the VA will make reasonable efforts to develop your claim. Um, the VA has responsibilities as it relates to the duty to assist. One of them being accessing any pertinent federal records, any STRs, also known as service treatment records, any VA records, uh, private medical records, and they also have a responsibility to send you to a CMP exam if they feel it's warranted. Well, we know that the VA has responsibilities, the veteran also has responsibilities. Um, the veteran needs to identify their private treatment providers. Uh, they need to uh, sign authorization forms that the VA will send them so that the VA can access their private treatment records. Veterans are obligated to attend any CMP exam that the VA requests. This is not optional. There are limits to the VA's duty to assist. Uh, a real important one is the VA's duty to assist does not guarantee service connection. And then there's a limit on reasonable efforts. If the VA will only make reasonable efforts. They won't do anything outside of that. Uh, so that's it's really the duty to assist is really not a whole lot to talk about. But even though there's not a whole lot to talk about, uh, there's still like a lot of questions that can come from the duty to assist. Questions as it relates to private medical records, CMP exams, and lay statements. I'm going to check the chat real quick. Okay, nobody in the chat. All right. So there are a lot of questions that could come up. So let's talk about private medical records. So, and I'll use a real life example myself. I had filed a claim years ago, and there was a hospital in Texas named Brackenridge Hospital that had closed down. So the VA, this is a great example of the limit of reasonable efforts. The VA was not able to access medical records due to the hospital being closed. So, but a veteran may have a question about private records, like, well, my physician retired 5 years ago, so how are those private medical files going to be accessed? That could potentially expose the VA's limits on reasonable effort. The VA will make a reasonable effort to try to retrieve the file of the retired doctor in this example, but if they can't retrieve the record, they can't retrieve the record. Um, another question a veteran may ask, well, or a veteran might say, I'm not signing authorization forms. Well, you're not obligated to sign authorization forms only if you want the VA to access your private treatment records. So if you don't sign authorization forms, the VA won't be able to do the HIPAA. The VA won't be able to access your private medical records, and it could possibly hurt your claim in the end, uh, particularly if it was strong evidence in those private medical records that would uh, uh, sort of meet one of the elements of service connection. Um, so other questions veterans may have about, say, lay statements down here. Well, do I have to provide lay statements? No, you don't have to, but it would be good to provide lay statements because that would, uh, when you submit that, it would be a part of the overall evidence that the VA weighs. Another question a veteran might have is about lay statements. Is the claim has been submitted, while the claim is being processed, can I upload lay statements? You surely can. If the VA hasn't made a rating decision yet, you can surely go back and upload the lay statement, and um, and the VA will process that along with the other evidence in your file. I'm going to check the chat real quick. All right, got one person here, one like. Okay, so now CMP exams. Uh, CMP exam, a lot of questions. So one question about the CMP exam, well, do I have to attend the CMP exam? You surely do. If the VA is sending you for a CMP exam, that means that they need a medical opinion either uh, uh, on the nexus, which is the connection, or in the case of a ratings increase on the severity. Another veteran might have a question, well, why hasn't the VA sent me out for a CMP exam? Well, if it's a part of their duty to assist, why haven't they sent me out? Well, it's a part of their duty to assist if they feel they need a medical opinion. There are claims where they can make a decision they don't need to send you to a CMP exam because of what I said earlier. They may have accessed your federal records, VA records, service treatment records, and they have all the information they need to make a decision. So another question veterans may have is, well, I attended the CMP exam and it doesn't feel like the CMP examiner listened to me or heard me or whatever. Well, I mean, the CMP examiner's job is to document everything you're saying or what have you, but just because you feel that the CMP examiner hasn't heard you, that doesn't make it true. But I would say if you have questions about that, contact the VBA and call and let them know. Also, if you're working with a VSO, if a VSO is helping you with the claim, let the VSO know. But you know, just a veteran's feeling about not being heard is very important, first of all. But it doesn't. A veteran could feel like they're not being heard at the CMP exam and end up with a favorable decision, or end up with service connection granted. It just uh, it all depends, and we know that every CMP examiner is different. It's just like anything else. Um, so other questions pertaining to private medical records a veteran may have is, well, the VA didn't request my private medical records. So the first question I would have for that veteran is, did you identify your private treatment provider? They can't, they can't access your records if you didn't identify the private treatment provider. If the veteran says, yes, I identified the private treatment provider and I signed the authorization forms, but I don't think they access my private treatment records. Well, you'll only know that. I would say you'll only know that toward the end, like when the claim is over. You can go and request your C file, and everything should be in that C file. Everything, um, from the VBA requesting information from VHA, which is like the VA hospitals, and private treatment records. Everything. Um, you could even have a veteran who say, well, you know what? I'm not attending the CMP exam. It could be a veteran that feels there's enough evidence in the service treatment records, federal records, VA records, lay statements that they feel like they don't need to go to a CMP exam. Well, this is a part of the veteran responsibility. You will attend the CMP exam if requested. Um, you know, now I'm not going to say that the VA uh, will not grant you service connection because you don't attend the CMP exam. I would say that's prevailing logic, but it's not gonna. It's not a good thing. I mean, unless you are unable to attend a CMP exam, if you are able to attend the CMP exam, the best thing to do is just go to the CMP exam. Uh, I'm gonna check the chat. All right. So, I mean, there are a lot more questions where these came from. Um, I'm just trying to think of another question that a veteran may. Oh, so the biggest the biggest uh, the biggest limit, and there are just a couple of limits, but the VA's, I can't emphasize this enough, that the VA's duty to assist does not guarantee service connection. They could fully develop your claim, help you do everything, So essentially, if you want to think of the VA as a partner with helping to develop your claim, but that doesn't guarantee service connection. If the three elements of service connection are not met, then the claim won't resolve favorably. Uh, so I know a lot of veterans have a question. Well, the VA has a duty to assist. Why haven't I been granted service connection? So other questions about, well, you know, a question the veteran could have is, well, the VA didn't send me the authorization forms so that I can sign them. Well, for that question, I would say, well, check your spam email. Uh, who knows if they might snail mail it? Check your mail again, check your spam email. And if you're positive that you didn't receive the authorization forms, call VBA, the Veterans Benefit Administration, and let them know that you didn't receive the authorization forms. And they're going to be your best point of contact for that. Um, so, all in all, the VA's duty to assist. I'm gonna flip this back over. There's a lot of questions that could arise from this, but so just want to emphasize, because maybe not all veterans may know this, but the VA or the VBA does not need authorization forms to access these records right here. The VA records, the service treatment records, and the federal records. Once you file a claim and they get all your information, um, social security number and things like that, they'll be able to access all of this and be able to put all of that into your file, and they'll definitely be using that to make a decision. So this is pretty much the VA's duty to assist in a nutshell. Just trying to think of a few more questions that veterans may have. And you know what? You know what I would say is a great question, a phenomenal question. Well, the definition, the VA's duty to assist reasonable efforts. What does that mean? I mean, because we can look in the dictionary definition and look up the word reasonable, but to me, even to me, it seems like there's some objectivity to that word and some subjectivity. I mean, subjectivity, what I mean is what may be reasonable for one person is not reasonable to someone else. So, like the earlier example I gave, when I filed a claim years ago and that hospital closed, Brackenridge Hospital, the VA is going to say that it was that they made a reasonable effort to try to obtain my medical record from that hospital, but the hospital closed. And not only, using me as an example, not only did the hospital close, it had been like 20 years since it had closed. So they only kept a record for like 8 or 10 years, and my record no longer existed. So this is when the VA is going to say, hey, we made a reasonable effort to obtain your private treatment record. It just simply was nowhere to be found. So that's what the VA is going to regard as reasonable. Um, I know some veterans, because I even had this thought kind of like, well, hey, you need to find a medical record or do something to help me out. I can understand that, but this reasonable is going to be reasonable. They're not going to spend like years trying to find medical records that doesn't exist. So I'm gonna check the chat, see if there's any questions here. And I don't see any questions. Okay. So this is the VA's duty to assist in a nutshell. If you like this live stream, if you could give me a thumbs up, please consider subscribing. Veterans helping veterans.